Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today's the January 26th edition of the SIG KCP Edge Community Call. Today, we have a few items on the agenda having to do with a public demonstration we'd like to do in the community in the coming months. I'll start off the call. We have a contributor code of conduct. So as contributors and maintainers in the CNCF community and in the interest of fostering an open and welcoming community, we pledge to respect all people who contribute through reporting issues, posting feature requests, updating documentation, submitting pull requests or patches, and other activities. Basically, just be nice to everybody on the call. Really appreciate you all joining today. I'll go ahead and share the agenda on the screen. And let me get rid of, all right, so let's get started here. So first up, we have some discussion that we'd like to take on about issues in PRs and how they are being processed. So Mike, I think you had some vested interest in this. Would you like to kick off the conversation?
Yeah, it's just standard stuff. And I have a PR, putting a proposed statement in the contributing.md document. So the issues are, one is just this Git history style thing that was linked to. Um, it there's in some sense there's no right and wrong here. It's just each project needs to choose for itself what it's going to work best for itself. We may take inspiration from what Kubernetes and the main KCP project are doing in Kubernetes. So the issue is when you make a PR, what does it look like in terms of Git commit structure? In the Kubernetes project, they enforce the restriction that a PR be from a branch that points to a commit that's built from a commit that's built from a commit that's built ultimately from something in the main line of development. And it's that simple. It's just a simple, strict chain of commits that diverge from the main. And ideally, it's one commit rather than a long chain. You can have more than one if it makes some sense to maintain a distinction for some reason. But normally it's expected to be one commit that diverges from the mainline development, and that's all. And in particular, one of the things that we have done that is forbidden in Kubernetes is to merge the mainline of development into the branch that's being submitted in the PR. That's not necessarily wrong. I mean, Git supports it. The other reason I think that Kubernetes doesn't want that is that it makes each PR in some sense self-sufficient and independent of other PRs. You can understand the development of the main line as a strict serialized sequence of contributions, each of which comes, before its predecessors. I'm sorry, before its successors and after its predecessors, which just makes it simple to understand. And I like that and advocate that and think that we should choose that. Um, let's see. Another issue is just timeliness of response. Uh, the Kubernetes, I believe, makes a statement. I don't think it's actually lived up to very well, but I think there's a statement that each PR gets some level of response within 1 business day. So I put that in our PR as well. Maybe I should stop talking now or actually, why don't you call up the PR if you can, um, and just to make sure I've covered it and open the floor for more discussion. If you actually look at the content of the PR file changed, yeah. Oh, right. This is question of approvers and or what level of assent is needed. Um, so, how many pairs of eyes do we need before something before it gets merged, independent of the contributors? Um, in OpenStack, they insisted on 2 pairs of eyes besides the contributors. In Kubernetes, I think the formalities, require one pair of eyes. Um, that is an LGTM from someone who's not a contributor. Um, the contributor, if they are in the owners list, or if the contributors are collectively covered by the owners lists, then there's an automatic approval. Um, we, as we inherited from the KCP, uh, don't seem to have that automatic approval, but we can still do a manual approve of our own work. So just need to be clear and decide, what we're going to do in terms of that level of policy, or that part of policy. So I'm going to stop here and invite further comments.
Well, I think at least having just approval from at least another person to do the review makes sense to me. I don't know if we, in this phase, we need to go as heavyweight as OpenStack, having two people for every PR seems too much.
Indeed, and the proposal here is one pair of eyes besides the contributors.
Yeah, so to me it looks reasonable. And by the way, KCP is what they do is also one person, additional person for review in the core KCP. Anybody knows?
Yeah, I think we've inherited what they do, right? That's the way. I didn't set this stuff up. I assume whoever set it up basically just cloned what the
Yes,
base KCP project is doing.
Mainly there is, sorry, mainly there are two levels. The one that, says let's go to main flag, and then approvers. And approvers are a limited set of people according to, the package inside the repo. And so you need to have both the LGTM and the approval in order for the peer to be automatically merged.
Right, but the approval can come from the contributors. So the formalities only force one other pair of eyes. I assume the LGTM cannot come from the contributors.
Yes, or at least if it could, it is not something that we allow ourselves generally.
Right, I've never dared to try it.
I think
Right.
I think that we should really be dynamic here. We should face the fact, right? We are currently a small group of people. Some things are desirable but not practical. We cannot have two pair of eyes, of course, because we don't have enough people. And I think everything here is reasonable. And when this community become bigger, we may choose to change some of the stuff, but at this point, the regular thing of, just everyone should, of course, try to avoid approve his own work, but, if it's a simple script, that I wouldn't go to enforce not allowing that, for example, right? Only because, we still haven't written a lot of code even. So it's just currently review and approval of configuration things, makefile, and such things. So I think just LGTM from someone else with some deep review and approve from, whoever can approve it. And if it's a simple thing, you can just go ahead and approve it. So that's my 2 cents.
Right. So when talking about this, we have to be careful about the word approve, because it is both a technical term that has a narrow meaning here in the formalities, and a general term that is broader. So when you said don't approve your own work, I think you meant it in some sense, in the broader sense. I think we are proposing here that someone who is in the owners can do a /approve on their own contribution.
He can technically. I think that as time goes on, instead of, enforcing two pairs of eye, you could, if you're working on a very complex and very big thing, you can either try to, for yourself, trying to get another reviewers, or we should switch as time goes on, to two LGTMs and so on. I'm just saying that at this stage, I don't really care if someone do a slash approve on his work or not. It's not really a big matter.
So I believe, um, so if I try to pick apart carefully your words, I think you've been inconsistent. But I think you mean what they said here, which is that we're going to insist on only one other pair of eyes, and that is conveyed through the formalities by the LGTM. We expect the contributors to not LGTM their own work. We allow contributors to slash approve their own work if they're in owners, of course, which is the only case it would be effective. And by the way, it doesn't so much matter whether it's like a lot of code, even a little bit of hacking around in the make file or the CI scripting is sufficient to break the build, and that's a really big deal. So I do want another pair of eyes, even on small central foundational stuff.
Yeah, seems reasonable. And regarding your first point, I'm only in favor on rebasing instead of merging. So if it was still open issue, unless we all agree.
Yeah, I think we have another item for that. So, Mike, are you looking for consensus here on this PR to merge it, or what's the next steps you think?
Yes, Andy, my intent here was that this PR consolidates the first two agenda items, and I'm looking for consensus on this.
Okay. All right. So what we can do is we can leave this as lazy consensus for next week, unless other people are strong. We'll not next week, but in 2 weeks, we'll um approve and merge it back. We'll give people 2 weeks to absorb the information in the document. And if you have any changes or updates you'd like to make, please do so between now and then. I think there's some matter of history style that we'd like to discuss also here. So Ezra, you brought it up, Mike. I think that was also a comment by you. So if you want to go through that as well, unless you feel you already addressed it.
Yeah, I think I did. It's in here. It's in the first paragraph, and I did discuss it already.
Very good. All right.
Yeah, this PR includes both items, so we can go on.
Very good. Okay. Next up. Oh, does anybody have any questions or comments for Mike or Ezra or anybody else who made comments on that specific PR? Okay, let's move on to the next one. So migrating to new versions of KCP. So I believe that we've already got some example of this happening with API Gen this week, where we needed a refactor there, but Mike, what other aspects of this would we like to tackle? And we have David on the
Yeah,
line.
no, actually, I think we don't have a good example of this. It's something
Okay.
that comes with a larger volume of code.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of dependencies. Right now, the Edge MC repo depends on a particular commit of the KCP repo, and we're going to need to move that forward from time to time. But every time we do, that involves all of the dependent code being updated all at once. And as there's more and more of it, that becomes a less and less feasible thing to do.
I
Do we-
think, Mike, one comment which helps. I think this is a regular problem on many projects. I think one thing that maybe we do not have in place is full testing, right? We should
It will
try
help,
to,
definitely.
yeah, we should try to see how we can introduce few tests that
But
will
in some
help us.
sense, that's second order. Testing will help us find mistakes. But even with testing in place, it remains the case. So my concern here is that the Edge MC I expect to be depending fairly heavily on the KCP repo, and that is moving fast and breaking things. It's still in a 0 point something release, so there's no great expectation of stability. Normally, between repos, you expect backward compatibility, but with the rapid pace in the KCP repo, There's no promise or expectation of that. So that's why I expect, and we expect a heavy pervasive dependence on that. So that's why I expect we're going to have a particular problem in this case.
So, Mike, what is the proposal here? Do you maybe want to suggest that we will stick with a specific official release because we are developing we are developing a concept, right? We do not really depend on very specific last minute features from KCP, so we can do that and maybe put some process on what should we do if we want to switch, versions. Maybe we will need to discuss this on the call before we do that and so on. That's the only possibilities I can see, right?
I give a few ideas. One, certainly the most obvious one, is to update infrequently. So right now we're depending on a commit that I picked up last Thursday morning, and it's working for us. I don't think we can afford to stay too far behind because, again, in the KCP repo, they're moving fast and breaking things and don't have a lot of concern with supporting older stuff. So I expect, since we're going to be depending fairly intimately and heavily on it and needing support, that we will not be able to stay very far behind. So there's a bound on that. I don't know what that bound's going to be. All of this is very forward-looking and speculative. So I don't have any sharp answers here, but that's one of the concerns that I have. So for example, right now, the thing in progress is that big refactoring of logical cluster work. Once that's done, my understanding is the next thing to do is to rebase on Kube release 1.26. We will probably want to pick that up just for practical reasons. And then we might stop and wait for the v0.11 release. That's kind of my expectation. And my hope is that since we've already picked up the big refactor, that those other two changes are not going to be really big, but I don't know. In terms of what we might do, we might break things up into smaller pieces that can have their own go.mods. And so those can be independently updated. Whether those go in different places in one repo or multiple repos, that's another question. But that's just another technical thing that can be done to deal with it. End of my thoughts.
A question for this proposal. In order to do that, you need to do that in KCP, or you have a solution in which you just have multiple modes in our repository and you leave the KCP as is? Can you do that?
What I meant is, yes, in Edge MC, we could have multiple parts of Edge MC, each with their own go.mod. And so when it comes time to update, these different parts of Edge MC could be updated independently. That would depend on us actually being able to break Edge MC into parts that could advance independently. I'm not sure what that would be.
I think this is very risky and maybe complex because you also assume that you will be able to break it in such a way that you will not have common kind of packages in both places, right? Because then you won't be able
didn't hear
to
clearly. You said it supposes you won't what?
That you will not have common kind of links or packages in those.
Well, if you did, you would have to make separate copies in each of the pieces. And that's unpleasant.
Let
So,
me
yes,
let me pause this here because I know David's on. David, do you have any comments or points of information, like the things that you learned along the way?
Not really for now. That's right, that we are still in a quite high pace of change. So I'm not sure I have much to say there, apart from maybe the things that were mentioned by Mike. Probably to that, sharding should be added as something that might require some changes according to how you would want to, include sharding into your controllers. So that would also be, a next step, I assume, in terms of changing, adapting to the KCP repo. But apart from that, I completely agree with the idea that splitting into several PCs on the KC on the agency side might make it easier to, pick up the changes on the KCP side that you only need on some parts of your work. Nothing much more to add.
So how do we want to proceed here? Do we want to come up with another document that describes how we should approach this, or is this
So
just
far-
more information sharing?
Yeah, at this point, we haven't got enough code that this is a big problem.
Okay.
I was just hoping for a good answer to come out of the wisdom of the crowd, but I don't think I've really heard much that we didn't already know. So I think we've just gone as far as we can for now.
Yeah, and maybe, by the way, maybe that could be an interesting topic also to raise on the KCP community call, or as a more general question about, how do we take into account depending projects. I don't have the answer here, but I surely think that it could be useful to bring that to the KCP community call.
All right, I'll put it on the agenda for the next KCP community call.
Maybe it's too early, but never know. At least it would fit the
Yeah, I
thinking.
expect the answer will be that it's too early, but if you think it's worth raising, then I'll raise it.
Yeah, sure.
Remember that at least in theory, there is a plan to break into KCP core and all of that. Let's first pass that, which will allow you also to more granularity of the dependency, and only then I think you are allowed to go with, not allowed, you should go with another, level of granularity.
Yes,
So-
that's right as well. We have to take that into account. You're right.
Okay. Any more comments or questions surrounding migration to new versions of KCP? Okay, let's move on to the next order of business. So we're out of housekeeping. We're into, next steps here. So, Mike, before you go to number 4 here, I'm gonna just mention number 5. I did open a PR for the creation of a dedicated KCP Edge Dev Slack channel. I'm waiting for approvals. I'm not sure if we'll get them. If not, Andy Goldstein has mentioned he's happy to have us pollute the KCP Dev Slack channel with the PRs and issues and approvals cycle that we require. So something to fall back on if we don't get approval here. I'll keep monitoring the progress on this specific PR and update the community as when and if information is forthcoming. Any questions about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, thank you. And next up, so we have a date set, March 30th. It's a Thursday. It's around the same time. Well, it's the same time or maybe 1 hour earlier than this community call, where we'll be doing a public community-based replay of our learnings to date for KCP Edge. And we're right now starting to kick around things that ideas, what we might show there. I think we want to stick with the main themes that are application lifecycle management and also those issues and items that revolve around scalability. And also, any of the other elements that have to do with our use cases, such as support for disconnected operations that may not be explicitly mentioned with either one of those themes. So with that, I know Mike has been doing some work in this space on trying to draw up an initial architecture and has some ideas and thoughts I think he wanted to share here today. So I thought we'd use the balance of this meeting to discuss in more detail what the Q1 POC for 2023 looks like for KCP Edge. Well, Mike, if you'd like to lead the discussion here, and Paolo and Ezra, if you'd like to chime in with whatever your thoughts are, and let's start to build some kind of a critical mass around what we want to show.
Okay, sure. So I do have a proposal. Let me bring it up and share it. Let's see here if I can do this reasonably well. Boom, file. Yeah, okay. So let me try to share my browser. It's going to be here somewhere. Why am I not seeing it? Let's see here. Terminal, Slack, Emacs, Firefox. There we go. All right. So, yeah, the intent is to focus a simple,
Mike,
yes.
I think it will be very helpful if you can somehow on the side put the diagram as well.
Yes, I plan to get there, but I really want to kind of focus on the goals and the scope. This because it's important to understand that this is just a fragment of what we're overall talking about. It's
Yes.
easy to get over ambitious, and I want to not do that. I want to do some experimenting with designing interfaces for the concerns that I think are distinctively edge, um, and some implementation to get some reality behind that, but it's limited implementation, and in fact, it's limited in some critical ways that fail on some critical criteria in the implementation, but I want to start with interfaces that don't build in those failures. And I expect and hope that this will prompt discussion of better implementations and future revisions of interfaces, and what implementation can be shared with TMC as we go forward to better implementations. But for this initial concept, so let me just go through the sort of the points that I think that we do and do not want to work on in this first one. So one of the things that I think is important in an edge scenario is really modularity is a key goal. And there's kind of a big, at the very highest level, there's a big layering distinction. People often make a distinction between infrastructure or platform versus workload. And I think it's important to follow that. I think a lot of organizations have very idiosyncratic ways of managing their infrastructure, and we need to have the kind of modularity, have modularity, so that the workload management is not married to one particular way of managing infrastructure. So the workload management should simply read or import the information from the infrastructure. Here, I talk about it in terms of an inventory. The workload management needs to import an inventory of the infrastructure. The proposal here is to reuse the location and sync target object types from TMC to represent that inventory. Let's see. So let's see next. The next key idea is copied from TMC, which is you need a container for all the objects in a workload, and we use a KCP workspace as such a container. So the main thing to demonstrate is this propagation of desired state from center to edge, and the return and summarization of reported state from edge to center. We define our own edge placement object type to direct that propagation. Let's see, and and like in TMC, it references the location and implicitly sync targets in location objects. And so it has a selection criteria for location objects, as in TMC. Unlike some other work, we do explicitly in Edge. We really are concerned about a large number of edge clusters. So the design of these interfaces are with a large number of edge clusters in mind, thousands to millions. Also, Another thing is that we do want, our vision for edge is that the edge clusters can tolerate intermittent connectivity, sovereignty, data, and whether there's other sovereignty concerns. And for those and other concerns, we do want each edge cluster to be able to operate, each edge location, which may in general be a collection of clusters, but and I mean geographic location. In TMC, location is more vague. It can mean a number of things. Here, I think we want to specifically purpose location to mean a geographic location. In general, it can have multiple clusters, but for now, we're starting with one cluster per location, but each location operates independently of other locations. So it does not require constant connectivity. It does not require communication, a regular or constant communication with service providers from anywhere else. We do want to demonstrate rule-based customization of the desired state and summarization of the reported state. So those are the things that I think I'm suggesting we do address, and that leaves some important things not addressed. So as I said, So I think for this one, I'm willing to not address actually supporting the intermittent connectivity in the implementation. The interfaces are designed for it, and it's okay if we start with the implementation that does not support it. Also, again, the interfaces are designed for a large number of edge clusters. It's okay if the implementation at first does not. Another simplification is one sync target per location. I think if we want to bring in really a concept of location that corresponds to things like IBM satellite, cloud satellite, that brings in an extra level of organization. And that's important just in terms of scoping. Get to that later. Another really important thing that I believe ultimately Edge needs is more than 2 layers in the hierarchy. More than just center and edge, but some intermediate vertices in between. But again, just to scope it down to something we can do quick and easy, not yet. Okay. Also, one more limitation, or maybe road mapping. I'm going to suggest that we start with not transporting non-namespace objects. That implies we're not transporting custom resource definitions. That implies we're not transporting custom resources that are defined by user-supplied custom resource definitions. I hope we can get to that. I hope we can take a 2-step roadmap here. First step without that, second step add it. Or maybe we just redefine it so we go there immediately. This is open for discussion. It requires obviously a bit more a different implementation. We can talk about how to do that. So now we can go to the overview picture. So the key idea here in these is that the implementation, that's a really terrible picture. Let me go to the, I have a better view of it here. Just a minute here. A Google map or Google drawing of it. Hello? Okay. The key idea is to reduce each edge placement problem to a collection of TMC placement problems, one for each edge involved edge cluster. And I can go through more details, but maybe I should just stop and get feedback on what I've said so far.
Mike, on the intermittent connectivity aspect, I just want to mention that initially we thought we found an issue with disconnecting the syncer, but with help also from David, we were able to find that apparently those flow in the test. So actually the disconnect, if we configure things properly that we tested, actually works. And so the syncer, at least in the scenario we tested, was able to stay disconnected even for an hour. I didn't test longer so far. Reconnect and things still continue to operate as expected. So I don't know if this is something that we want to test, to test further or to show in the POC, but I don't think it seems to be not an issue for now.
Yes, maybe to give an element. There is an argument when you start KCP that allows setting the delay. You wait before considering a sync target unreachable or non-ready. That's the heartbeat delay. So by default, it's about, I think, 1 minute or something like that. I'm not sure we can completely disable that. So for now, you would put that to maybe 1 year. I don't know, but obviously we could very simply just disable this and completely, because this drives rescheduling when the sync target is considered non-reachable. So
Yeah,
it's mainly just a scheduling question here.
well, I think there is a more fundamental issue, which is in TMC, when the workload is a client of a Kube API server, it is a client of this workspace in the center, not an API server in the edge.
Yes, that's the sibling issue. I mean, that's the other part of the question, and there obviously this change is down in the sinker by mutating the deployment on the fly when we put it downstream. By just replacing the environment variables and all this. So here it would be quite, it's just a feature added on top of normal syncing. So it would be quite easy to just have an option to disable this in the syncer, or maybe just have a way to build another syncer that does not add this thing.
Okay. So maybe we could pick up this ambition of supporting intermittent connectivity. That would be great. I'll leave it to you to suggest whether you think it's better to make an option on the one shared syncer, or, well, I'll have an opinion. If it's a small change, it seems to me it should be shared code with an option rather than duplicated code.
Yeah, I mean, in this specific regard, it might be simple. Then I don't know, and what is harder to answer right now is, will there be in the TMC syncer other specificities which are much more specific to TMC? In which case, the second option of having a dedicated HMC syncer might also make sense. But in any case, I assume that a quite big part of the code could be shared, at least the source.
I have an opinion also here that I think because, at least in this phase, I see that things are changing very rapidly, right? So the code of the sync has been updated because also it goes in pair with the virtual workspace of Vue.
Yeah. Sure.
So these things are changing very rapidly. So for us, I think, at least in this phase, I wouldn't be for trying to maintain a fork of the syncer because it's going in pair also what is going on with the core.
Sure.
With the virtual workspace, so we'd have also to keep on, to work with the virtual workspace that you have. So for now, at least, I think the option of somehow switching this feature on and off will be much easier. But then maybe later on, when things hopefully are more stable and maybe the virtual workspace API is not changing that fast, maybe we can look, this other problem of maybe we have other requirements. Maybe we need the syncer sort of. Maybe even sharing APIs or libraries that you have right now, right? I don't think we want to maintain a huge fork of that syncer as it is.
No, clearly, no. Surely, I mean, that would be possibly in the future if we really see that on the syncer side, there are, incompatible parts of the code due to diverging use cases. Then obviously the idea would be, I think, to factorize the code on both sides so that we can, optimize the quantity of the code that is shared. but not forking. I mean, I don't think it would be. It would be two binaries using mostly the same code, the same libraries, or the same common code with some slight variations.
Yeah.
I think.
For example, I understand that you have this kind of frameworks to basically transformers to apply transformation and stuff like that. So I wonder that eventually can be made more pluggable in a way, so that, for example, you define your transformation, or don't have to basically copy all the code, but you have just to plug some piece of code there.
Yes. I think it's a bit hard for now to foresee exactly what would be required in the future, but I think that from sharing the source code to sharing complete libraries, or I mean, we have some sort of freedom here to choose as time goes.
Okay.
And yes, as for the current Syncer, there are still some refactoring, not small refactoring, in order to introduce sharding support into the Syncer. So obviously that would be easier for you to keep using it for now, at least. But I mean, we can. I think we can open an issue still on the KCP side to just allow disabling the the in-place change of deployments to point to the central KCP, because that's just possibly just something to enable disable.
Yeah, that is not just, I think, for Edge. I mean, this is more general requirement, right? You may want to install an operator on the cluster or stuff like that, and you don't want to necessarily point back to KCP all the time.
Yes, for side use cases that were not the initial use cases that we were thinking of, that could be interesting. Sure. Probably a Syncer-wide setting or something like that.
So then I will revise this proposal to include supporting intermittent connectivity in the implementation and open that issue in the KCP repo.
Well, I didn't commit to any timeline.
Well,
why does it need to be Syncer-wide option? I would argue that it's kind of a per controller or per deployment option, right?
Well,
I could think even on a single deployment with multiple pods and controller, where some of those interact with the local API server, and some of those want to interact with the KCP API server.
Well, I think this has to be discussed, because possibly this might bring some security, concerns. If the end user somehow can decide or hook into, I want my deployment coming from KCP to be able to discuss with some other components running, on the physical cluster, or even to point to the physical cluster API server. That's very impacting in terms of security. So, I mean, leaving that to the end user without a clear...
You do that already. You just do not allow, you do not reconcile, or you do not watch and listen to the resources on the physical API server, but you do run pods there. You're allowed to run stuff there. So you do use already the physical cluster resources, scheduling.
Yes, surely.
So
surely,
yeah, I fully agree with you that we need to take into consideration all the security aspects and permission aspects. Maybe it's something that the physical cluster need to explicitly allow you to do, and so on.
Yeah.
But in any case, from the use case I'm now looking at, per Syncer will not be enough. That's my only input. If you think it's valuable, we can bring it in the KCP call as well to see what are the plans for that. If you think it's valuable.
Maybe if creating an issue first and have some people jump into it and start discussing, that could be a first step. And then when things take shape, we can bring that to the community call, if you think it's the best way.
Yeah, sounds excellent.
Yes, so I think so I'm going to revise my plan here. I'm going to open the issue first. I'm going to revise this proposal to put that supporting intermittent connectivity as a maybe. And then as
Yeah.
progress is made in the KCP repo on resolving that issue, that'll resolve the maybe here.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd say this can also be, be done by a peer that someone of your team would issue on the syncer.
I'm sorry, I didn't clearly hear that.
No, sorry, I was saying that as soon as we have the issue and it discussed and agreed upon, then you have all the freedom to provide a peer for this because.
Oh yes, right, implement it. Yeah, sure, right. The question is, as you guys just discussed, it's brings up some non-trivial issues. So yes, the question in my mind is, we don't know, whether there'll be consensus on what that PR should do.
You're right.
All right. So let's see where Andy, I can go into more details on this design. I did write up a little bit about each of the pieces. I can go over that.
Yeah, please continue. I think the
okay.
team that's assembled here is, actively will dispatch based upon what we're setting the course for here. So they should know the information and they should be asking questions about how they can help.
Okay.
I have a question about the sync to power. I think actually, eventually due to this connectivity pattern and all of that, we probably will end up having our own syncer, right? So in that syncer, we can apply the pattern that we want regarding con, uh, connectivity to the KCP API server or to the local API server. Do it asynchronous, synchronous. We can do whatever we want there, right?
I have a little, I'm a little unsure what to do with the word eventually, because I think eventually we want to stop using this architecture here. I think we want to eventually stop transforming edge placement into TMC and just directly implement the edge interfaces. Whether
So there's only the edge scheduler in the middle rectangle, and the edge, sorry, and you have the edge. We want to have our own version of the edge syncer, right? It will not be the KCP syncer, or am I wrong here?
oh look, I believe in making incremental progress, right? So that's why I've only outlined this POC, explicitly expecting that things will change after this POC, based on what we learn in this POC. So I have only begun to sketch this design. I have not worked out all the details of the design. I expect things will be realized and learned in the course of that, as well as implementing and trying to experiment with it. And my plan is to do that learning before outlining the next step. But I expect the next step will be different, will not involve transforming to TMC problems, but exactly what it looks like, I'm not prepared. I don't think we should try to say.
So
I will add one other thing. This use of
whatever.
mailbox, if I may, let me just add one other thing. One of the things I do anticipate is that the next turn of the crank will not involve mailbox workspaces. They're a really inefficient way to deal with stuff, but I may be wrong. Maybe we ultimately need it, but it looks pretty expensive to me, so I'm not real enthused about it. But I'll stop there.
So two comments. So first of all, this is why I mentioned that my comment was to Paolo. I'm completely fine with the POC. I fully agree with the incremental steps and so on. I'm just saying that Paolo raised a question about, in general, should we, add some functionality to Syncer, allow it to, not set the controller to talk to the KCP server and so on. So but this is kind of a longer term, right? It's something that we need for the future. So if we talk about the future, this is why I raised the question, but in the future, we will have our sinker in any case. So we don't really need that support from KCP. We can do that, and if they like it, they can take it from us, right? So that was
Well,
my thought.
I don't know that. In the farther future after this POC, we'll still have something like a sinker. I think it's an open question how much code can be shared.
And one point about the mailbox workspaces, but probably David know about that much, much better. I think that I looked a little bit on the changes on the sharding that are coming in, and we for sure we need to look into that because one of the aspects that we look on is scale, and there are approaches to address scale even in a single region, and we need to look whether how maybe on POC 1.5 or POC 2, we need to see how to leverage the sharding that they are introducing into our model. It may save us uh, some of the sharding that we are trying to do here, or the multiple mailboxes and so on. We need to look into.
Yes, definitely the sharding is a concern. And I, as just for a matter of scoping and making this something we can complete relatively quickly, I wanted to put it out of scope of this POC, but I am very concerned about sharding for scale, and am happy to pursue it even concurrently. I don't really want to put off for a quarter, think about sharding for scale. But I do want to scope it as independent work from this POC.
I agree. That's a very good thing. So, David, it's coming soon, right? I saw the PR and I saw that it was kind of approved. I actually saw you were the last commenting on that PR. So, what do you know where any place when it's going to be merged? The whole sharding thing, uh, David?
Sorry, um, I didn't hear you were speaking to me. Part of it is already there. Current work is mainly on updating all the end-to-end tests as well. So I think in the few next weeks things will clear up.
Great sense.
It's really at least on the KCP core side, one of the last main foundational things that is brought in order to have a consistent proposal. So I mean that should come quite soon.
Great. We'll have a look at this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm currently working on updating the sinker for sharding.
I saw that also the tests need to be updated. But I'm interested to look into the sharding for scale, not necessarily the multi-region and all of that. So I'll give it a try once there.
Yeah, surely, and it's quite interesting to go into the various type of deployment, infrastructural deployment topologies, because you can have a number of shards which are hidden behind the same external URL, mainly through the front proxy, and then effectively this becomes sharding for scaling, because then you can move, not now but in the future, the idea is to be able to move even a workspace from one shard to another, and it would be possible as long as the shards are in the same region, mainly hidden behind the same front proxy external URL. So that's the goal, yes, to allow both type of sharding.
Thank you.
I do want to discuss sharding for scale, but not in the context of this POC, and we're out of time in this meeting. So Andy, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you for yielding. I appreciate that. So yeah, so folks, in the next 2 weeks, I expect to see a flurry of activity around issues and PRs related to this POC that's been put out there for discussion and comment. And I look forward to reviewing those next time we meet in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, we also should have some feedback. We've got some things cooking on the side from the point of view of observability and another use case that has come to us for hierarchical control plane, which begs the case for multi-tiered hierarchy and different places for command and control and view of status summarization within it. But that would be, of course, post POC for Q1, but we should start lining up those discussions. So I expect to bring them to the table. So that's the development. We'll continue to track that. Thanks everybody for joining the call, and we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.